Welcome. Thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind giving us a like, and consider going ahead and subscribing as well, that would be fantastic. And if you really want to go the extra mile, go down to the description below and click the Patreon link. Lots of cool stuff going on there. As always, I love you, and enjoy the show, guys. Chrysalis, a story by user BeaverFur. Chapter 11. Under the light of Zunvir's only sun, the Empyrean Palace gleamed like a beacon. Like a massive jewel, its polished outer walls reflecting the light of the day and bathing the gardens around the grand building in soft green and blue hues. Here and there, single hieroglyphs shone in golden tones, majestic symbols of a past era still engraved on the palace's facades. The sight was magnificent, breathtaking. It had been designed to be so, Dalcott knew. Carefully engineered to draw the attention of the eye, to inspire, to be a constant reminder of the glory and supremacy of a Zunvir empire that no longer existed. But today, the gemstone-like appearance of the palace reminded Dalcott of a very different quality that glass had in common with the Zunvir Republic: its fragility. Dalcott had returned to a different Zunvir than the one he had left behind with Naxtani. People here looked scared, shell-shocked, on edge. After the destruction of Yavit, the Republic hadn't been able to keep the nature of the menace a secret anymore. And to make matters worse, the tense conversation in orbit over Anasax Farvan between the Council and the Terran had also leaked, adding fuel to the flames. Now, the Republic at large knew that an exponential replicator was bent on destroying their civilization as revenge for some horrible crime they didn't remember committing. Not only that, but they had watched the creature vaporize an entire Council fleet during the battle that followed, that had been broadcasted live to the entire population, up until the satellites in orbit around the planet had died in the final blast. When Dalcott received the reports on the battle, he had felt a sinking sensation. His worst predictions had come true, just as he had feared. Negotiations breaking down right after they started. The Council's secret weapon failing to stop the Terran, which, if still alive, would now consider them all as enemies. A combined fleet of the strongest nations in the galaxy with some of the most technologically advanced warships ever built, simply wiped out. He knew that the Council was far from defeated, but it would take some time before they could muster their forces and mobilize another fleet of similar firepower. And meanwhile, people back at the Council core worlds had started looking for culprits. Having been the one to personally talk to the Terran, the Zakharnine was being heavily criticized, which Dalcott feared might discourage the Grand Minister from further attempts at a peaceful resolution, opting instead to take a step back and let the military take both the initiative and the blame. The only positive outcome was that they had managed to stop the Terran from destroying yet another world. Might have even killed the monster, in fact, though he doubted it. It wasn't clear what had happened after the last major explosion, but Dalcott wasn't too optimistic about the Terran being dead. At least the Replicator's offensive had been thwarted for the time being. A temporary respite, though how long that would last was anyone's guess. Which was why Dalcott was frustrated. They had arrived at Zunvir a whole 2 days before, but the local military authorities had refused to let the strange ship the Terran had built land on the planet itself. They had been diverted to one of the orbital planetary defense stations and interrogated separately more than once. At least they had received medical treatment for their more serious injuries. But the lost hours frustrated him. When every passing minute might mean one more lost opportunity to gather information on the Terran's origins and put it to good use. The excessive paranoia was just another example, Dalcott thought, as he walked across the gardens, of how scared and horrified the Zunvirians were. They were closing ranks around the old tribal lines, a population divided and on the verge of panic. A dangerous combination, Dalcott knew. Panic had the potential of turning sapient species into mere animals, reacting with equal unpredictability, lashing out even at those trying to help. And the ruling elite of the Zunvir Republic must have been aware of that, because the palace was surrounded by a veritable army. Armored soldiers wrapped in mechanical suits patrolled the gardens. Transport vehicles moved both supplies and troops here and there. They had installed explosive traps, portable guided missile launchers, anti-siege weapon platforms, shield barriers, automated defense towers. None of them, Dalcott knew, would make any difference if the Terran had survived and decided to attack the capital. No, they weren't defending the palace from the Terran, but from a closer, more immediate danger, that of the Republic's own citizens and tribes, of the many other smaller enemies that might want to take advantage of the weakened condition of Zunvir. He reached the stairs leading up to the palace's southern entry and was stopped at a checkpoint manned by the Emperor's guard. The soldiers hand-picked by the Emperor himself, or more likely, Dalcott thought, by one of his staff. This time they weren't wearing the golden, flashy uniforms they always used at official events, but some nondescript black and gray combat armor instead. With a hint of worry, Dalcott also noticed that alongside the official golden emblem representing the guard itself, many of them had taken to wearing colored stripes painted on the surface of their armors, the colors of their respective tribes. He recognized some of the most influential ones, the red and yellow from the Varuzna tribe, the same one the Emperor belonged to, the blue and white of Anasax, a dark green representing the Sokoks. Was this a sign that the soldiers were no longer responding to the Congress of the Republic, or even to the Emperor himself? Were they openly declaring their true allegiances? Or was he overthinking things? Maybe it was just posturing, each tribe flaunting their strength, sending messages to the other tribe leaders by way of little stripes. He knew that a single tribe doing it would have sufficed to start the chain reaction. Whatever the case, it was worrying. Zunvir's previous history as an empire was full of tribal wars and internal conflicts. It hadn't been until their discovery of warp technology and the ensuing Empyrean decree that these wars had receded somewhat, the tribes successfully redirecting their ambitions towards outward expansion rather than inner power struggles, colonizing and conquering new star systems rather than fighting for control of Zunvir itself. Of course, no empire in the history of the galaxy had managed to keep expanding forever, and inevitably the Zunvir Republic had ran into a rival it couldn't beat, the Galactic Federal Council. The resulting crushing military disaster had put a final end to the age of the warring tribes, and transformed the empire into the current republic. The tribes were still there, of course, still aggressively competing, but now they did so through politics and market economy. Or they were supposed to, Dalcott thought. Because this, a return to the tribal armies, faint as this signal might be, was a very disturbing thought.
Dalcott, yes? Of the council?
Asked the soldier closer to him in a guttural voice. Acting Ambassador Dalcott, he confirmed. I have an urgent appointment with the Emperor. The Zunvirian soldier's head bobbed.
You are awaited. Go to the courtyard of the admirals.
His accent was hard to understand, but at least he could speak the council's interlanguage. That was common among the Republic's elites who had been practicing the language for years, but not so much with the rest of the population. Dalcott nodded and climbed the stairs quickly. The sense of foreboding he had felt before became stronger the moment he entered the building. The ancient artifacts and unique works of art decorating the main corridors were in the process of being removed and placed into metal boxes. No doubt in order to be sent somewhere safer. Half the people he crossed paths with were either soldiers, part of the Emperor's guard, or openly carried handguns. He consoled himself that he could still see some of the government workers he had gotten used to, still at their usual positions. Administrative staff, security chiefs, senior officers, and advisors. It meant that, at least, there was still a semblance of normality. The courtyard of the Admirals wasn't really a courtyard. It was a wide, high-vaulted corridor, and the admirals were the dozens of life-sized bronze statues that lined its walls. Like the ones decorating the terraces outside, these two had small placards underneath. Except that in the case of the statues in the courtyard, the placards didn't narrate any military stories. There was no mention of legendary battles, glorious assaults, or inspiring last stands. No, all of the placards here followed the same austere format. The name of whoever the statue represented followed by a short inscription, always the same in every placard. Of exalted will. Dakota had visited the corridor before, of course, the first time he had toured the palace with Naxtani, still fresh in his new position. The ones honored here, he knew, weren't just military heroes, competent generals and courageous soldiers. No, these were all of those things and more. These were the pioneers, the leaders that had ventured into the unknown, weapon in hand, spearheading the military expeditions that had conquered entire star systems and colonized new worlds in the name of the Empire. Half explorers, half conquerors. Some had limited luck, their greatest achievement being the establishment of a small mining outpost in some nondescript forgotten moon. Others had led massive fleets, fought years-long wars of subjugation against neighboring alien nations, built new colonies in recently acquired green planets, forged new trade routes. But all of them, no matter their successes or failures, were granted the same honorific rank of admiral, the highest rank in the Zunvirian fleet. When he had originally visited the place with Naxtani, she had joked at how misleading the room's name was. The courtyard of the admirals wasn't a courtyard and didn't feature any actual admirals, just conquerors and warlords bankrolled by one tribe or another. The Emperor himself waited almost at the end of the corridor next to one of the statues. The last time Dakota had seen the head of government, the Zunvirian had looked confident and energetic, talking to his subordinates and political peers at the dinner. It was hard to believe it was still the same emperor. Despite being taller and bigger than Dakota, just like all Zunvirians were, the emperor somehow managed to look small and frail. He was wearing a reinforced gray combat coat over his favored silky white garments, making for an odd combination. And Dakota guessed it wasn't his to begin with. Dakota wasn't sure he could place the feeling the emperor's posture and body language conveyed. Not scared exactly, but beaten? Resigned? He waited for the emperor to address him, according to protocol. But the Zunvirian didn't react to his presence, not even looking at Dakota. Eventually, he got tired of waiting. "Emperor," Dakota said, "I believe we've been introduced before. I'm Dakota, acting ambassador for the Galactic Council. We had an appointment?" The Emperor's 4 eyes moved to stare at him, the rest of the Zunvirian's body still. Eventually, the leader spoke in a tired voice, his words slow and measured.
"Yes, I remember you. Tell me, Dakota. I have been a good ally to the Council, yes? I have agreed to your proposals. I have followed the treaties to the letter. I have committed to the political and economic reforms your experts outlined, and pressured the tribes to implement them. Is that not true?"
Dakota blinked. What was this all about? Better to play along, for now. "That is correct, Emperor. The Council is very pleased with your efforts so far, and we hope that the ties between our—" The Zunvirian took a step forward, towering over him.
"Then explain to me, Acting Ambassador Dakota of the Galactic Federal Council. Explain to me why your people have betrayed us."
Dakota's eye membranes contracted at the sudden outburst. He had almost expected the Zunvirian to attack him, but the Emperor didn't look angry so much as bitter. I'm not sure I understand, Emperor," Dakota said. "How has the Council betrayed you?"
"Your admirals. They promised us that they would stop the Terran, that they would protect our industrial world."
Dakota was confused. Did he mean Anasax Farvin? Sure, it might not have been outright victory, but the Terran had been stopped. The industrial world had survived. "Emperor, I understand the battle was not decisive, and the Terran might still come back to fight again, but judging from the reports I received, I believe the world of Anasax-Farven was indeed successfully defended.
70,000 simultaneous thermonuclear detonations in low orbit. An electromagnetic pulse so strong that it wiped out almost all electronic devices in an entire hemisphere. Thousands of power plants, factories, and manufacturing complexes, all rendered useless. A complete breakdown of the transportation system. The orbital yards, gone. The communications satellites, gone. Anasax-Farven depends on freighters to deliver the food the population needs. But we can't deliver food because there is a sea of debris encasing the entire planet that will take months to clear. No unarmored ship can land or leave the world. Local authorities are already ordering the factories to be dismantled, the ground they cover to be reverted back to farming. But we expect widespread famines to start soon. But all of this, acting ambassador, this is success to you. Yes?
Dalcott took a deep breath, making sure not to stare away from the Emperor's resentful eyes. Yes, it is, Dalcott said, his voice firm. As bad as things are, it is still better than the alternative, Emperor. It's still better than what happened to Yavit.
So the slow death is preferable to the quick one, yes?
Dalcott closed his eyes, trying to avoid shouting his frustration back at the Zunvirian. It wouldn't help. He knew the Emperor had to be under a lot of pressure from the tribes and his own fleet commanders, and that he was likely using Dalcott as a venting outlet. But that didn't mean he had to stand still and take it. Politics was about influence and leverage. The Emperor still needed the Council more than the Council needed the Emperor. And right now, Dalcott was the Council. I don't know the answer to that, Emperor. But perhaps the Terran does, seeing as it claims its species was exterminated by yours. The Emperor's bitterness vanished in an instant, and his expression went back to the resigned look from when the conversation started.
Ah, yes. The allegations.
Are they true? Asked Dalcott, bracing for the response.
They are.
Dalcott nodded. Though he had kept a faint glimmer of hope that the whole thing would turn out to be a huge misunderstanding, he had expected as much. The video evidence the Terran had delivered was too solid, too convincing to be a complete fabrication. But there was another question Dalcott knew he needed to ask, one whose answer he feared even more. Was this the only time, at least, the only genocide committed by Zunvir? A silence.
No,
the Emperor replied. Dalcott shook his head and let out a tired sigh, not sure what to say. Because how could he respond to that? To that horrible revelation? Naxtani hadn't taught him the proper diplomatic words for that. I see, he said, at last. Tell me about these Terrans, then. How did it happen, and why? The Emperor's head bobbed, and he pointed to the statue at his left.
You are standing in front of the one responsible,
he said. Dalcott turned to look at the statue. It depicted a tall Zunvirian, dressed in overly complicated robes, with stripes of cloth wrapped all around the main body. Dalcott recognized the style from seeing it in other statues, old documents, and reproductions. An ancient and flaunting formal wear that had gone quickly out of fashion after the fall of the Empire. Looking at the placard, the dates confirmed it. This admiral had lived and died almost 300 years ago, which placed him right in the middle of the age of imperial expansion that followed. The Empyrean Decree, said Dalcott.
Yes. Admiral Canafter, depicted here, was in command of a relatively small exploration and conquest fleet during the Second Surge. The fleet had been provided to him by the Kakasna tribe, and he was tasked with expanding towards the Outer Rim, to claim the new worlds he found under the name of his patron tribe.
And he found the Terran's world.
Indeed. The Terrans, or humans as they called themselves, were a planetary industrial civilization with limited access to their orbital space.
Dalcott shook his head. And what? He just decided to exterminate them? It doesn't fit. Why not conquer them instead, and have them serve as a subservient population? Isn't that what happened to other races in the path of the Empire's expansion?
That's what awaited such species discovered during the later surges, after the decree was amended, yes. But before that...
The Emperor paused, as if trying to find the correct words.
The decree's initial wording had unintended consequences.
"Explain," said Dalcott, in a commanding tone. He was faintly amused at the role reversal, at how it was him ordering the Emperor around, but quickly ignored the thought.
The Empyrean decree granted tribes administrative power over the worlds they conquered, yes? But a different clause declared that any conquered alien populations would be treated as a subservient tribe.
Dalcott nodded. He knew enough of Zunvir's history to have heard about the subservient tribes, or subservient species, rather. All of them had inevitably declared their independence after the fall of the Empire, and a couple of them had joined the Galactic Council since then.
The issue, continued the Emperor, was that the subjugated aliens were subservient to the Empire itself, and not the tribe that had conquered them. It resulted in all the taxes going to the Emperor's treasury, while the conquering tribe was still tasked with enforcing the peace, quelling any rebellions, and taking care of the planet administration.
Dalcott was starting to understand what the Emperor's words implied. They painted an ugly picture. So, claiming the Terran's world would have been a monetary loss for the Gakasna tribe, Dalcott said. They would have needed to foot the bill for the planet's upkeep, while all the income taxes went straight to the Emperor.
Indeed. To Admiral Canafter's patrons, it would have been much more profitable if the humans simply weren't there.
Dalcott felt a chill. So, was this it? Just that. That simple. It wasn't what he had expected upon hearing the Terran's accusation, even though he hadn't been sure what to expect. But this felt wrong in a deeper way, disturbing in its callousness. There was no anger, no hate, no history of xenophobia behind this genocide. Just simple economic and political gains. Somehow it made it even worse. But the Emperor at the time, Dalcott said, didn't he do anything? After all, the genocide would also have robbed him of the taxes he could get.
Indeed, exterminating an alien population was illegal even under the decree. But the humans had nuclear weapons, and tribes of their own that tended to fight each other. It was easy for the Gakasna tribe to forge evidence claiming the aliens had self-exterminated in a nuclear planetary war. These humans, they weren't a very peaceful species themselves, yes?
Dalcott nodded. Judging from the Terran's own actions, not a very peaceful species seemed like an appropriate label.
The forged evidence wouldn't have held up in a trial, of course, the Emperor said. It was an obvious falsification that fooled no one. This is how we can know what really happened. But the power of the Emperor during that age depended on the support of the tribes and their armies. A trial would have made all the tribes that had similar secrets in their past band together. It would have caused an internal schism, yes? A civil war.
So the Emperor let it slide, said Dalcott.
And eventually reformed the decree so that it wouldn't happen again, yes.
Dalcott sighed again. He didn't know what to make of it. On one side, it was cruel and wrong and horrifying. It demanded justice and retribution. On the other hand, it was history. Ancient history at that. The admiral who had decided it, the officers and soldiers who had carried out the orders, the emperor who had looked the other way. None of them were alive anymore. Not even the power structures and laws that had provided the incentives for it to happen. Even the Kakasna tribe had all but disappeared, nowhere close to its former glory. The Terran, it was seeking justice, but there simply was no one left to punish. No one alive today that was still responsible for what happened. The only crime the current Zunvirians had committed was that of being unlucky enough to have been born the descendants of war criminals. Hardly something they could have any control over. A loud detonation coming from behind interrupted his thoughts. He turned in place, right in time to see the end of the corridor enveloped in a thick cloud of brown dust. He could hear the muffled sounds of weapon discharges in the distance. A group of more than 30 members of the Emperor's Guard rushed into the corridor through a couple of side doors, wearing full combat armor, complete with helmets and energy guns in their hands. Dalcott felt a sense of relief at their sight, which quickly vanished when he realized the soldiers weren't moving towards the commotion. Instead, they surrounded the position where he and the Emperor stood, and raised their weapons towards both of them. As the squad approached, Dalcott noticed one more thing that made his last hopes that this was all some misunderstanding vanish. All the soldiers were wearing the same white and blue-colored stripes on their uniforms. The colors of the Anasax tribe. Dalcott was slowly raising his empty hands when the Emperor turned to speak to him, his tone a mix of amused and resigned.
"Ah, I believe you call this a coup? Yes?"
All right, guys, that is going to be it for this one. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. As always, I really do appreciate you. If you want to go down into the comments and leave, your favorite recipe for chili, that would be fantastic. If you have any complaints, please do that too. Like, comment, subscribe. Go down to the link in the description and click the Patreon link so that you can be the first to see new video releases and be notified when I'm going to do private streaming events on Discord. All right, guys, I appreciate you. I love you. I'll talk to you all later. Bye!